Good morning, y'all. My name is Samantha Mirabal with Mocha's application team. Sorry, I'm running a minute late. We're doing our design shop talk today. So if you have any questions while we're live, please type them in the chats. Don't send them privately or put them in the forum. I don't check that while we're live. But go ahead and send any over in the chat. And as I see them, I will try to work on answering those for you. I do sit here by myself, so I have a side monitor set up. So if I'm not staring at the camera or at the computer, that's what I'm looking at, just to try to keep track of any comments or questions as they come in. So let me make sure both of the things are up. There's Facebook. There is YouTube. So it looks like we are live. Excellent. All right, so I will start off with the pile of questions sent in ahead of time. And are both of these live? Yeah, they are. Cool. All right. So I'll start off with the questions sent in ahead of time, and then we'll jump over to the chats as we have them. How do I create an effect like this? Okay. So when you look at this, I'm looking at like this one right here, right? So I can see stitch directions all going this way and then all going this way on this segment here, right? This segment, they're kind of straight up and down. Through the center here, they're all going essentially in the direction my arrow is moving. And then this C around the edge, so if you imagine this as a fill like that, they're kind of radial out, right? So there's a bunch of ways we can do this. I can create a fill that's kind of shaped like this, all right? And then add split lines. So I'll go show you how to do that. And you just kind of put them in there to create that effect, and then basically make these three separate sections. Another way you could do this is by using column 1s and column 2s to kind of scribble in shapes randomly through there. So let's go look at how we do that. Where's DesignShop? There we are. Broccoli, I started it. I started a few different ways to look at this, right? So what you can do on this is, for instance, this section here is a section of just using single line centers, right? So basically scribbling them around. I did put a complex fill under it loosely, just for any gaps so that it wouldn't be completely blank. And, okay, this thing is being weird today, but we're good. Okay. Sorry, the live feed looks different on my little interface than it does usually, so it's confusing me. Anyway, so I put this fill down here and changed the density to something large, mainly because I'm not trying to make this design bulletproof. I just want to have some color down there so that if my scribbles don't line up right, then I still have coloring in there, right? So these are just single line centers through here that I literally drew like this. Grab a single line and I went, okay, let's make this one scribble this way. Okay, so I've got a scribble through there. Now, what do I do to that to get the edges to look a little more rough and less scripted? I can go into the properties of that, go into these effects, and do a random edge, and then you can play with the random edge, but you see that kind of randomizes that satin stitch, each stitch length, and kind of sticks it out past and inside and outside of the edge to give it a more rugged look around there, right? So you can do that. Now, this section right here, I actually used column 1s right here to, again, change the stitch direction along there. So rather than just having everything one direction, I have the stitch directions rotating around. Yeah, this is broccoli. Yep, someone asked in the question. So yeah, the question was, how do we get, I'll show you the picture in a minute, how do we get this look, right? So I drew a bunch of these guys, and then again, went into the effects, turned on the random edge, and you can pretty much just keep scribbling around to get that rough look. Now, on the other one where I showed you up here, like this section, they're all going this way, the stitch direction's all this way, this one's going that way, and then it's kind of radial around in a C. Okay, so let's look at how we do that. So I started it here, just different way, but let's draw again. So I've got I don't know, section like this, and I'm just going to rough in a broccoli shape with the different stitch directions, and then we'll fix it. And then we'll do another one. And that one, the stitch directions were, I don't remember. I got to go back and look again. I don't want a hole. Escape. Oh, click here. Escape. There we go. I don't want a hole. Hit enter. They were this way. Were they? I don't remember. I guess I could turn on the picture and look at it and actually trace it. I just didn't want to. Oh, so these ones, the stitch directions were actually this way. This one, the stitch directions were this way. And then a C around the edge. All right, mine's not nearly as broccoli-like, but shape-wise. And then this one was radial around. So how do we make that radial? Stitch direction there and there. Okay. All right. So now what do we do to get that more jagged look to each of these sections? Well, on here, I can come over. If I hold this guy down, that's where our hole is. We can do a insert split line or insert fill island. So let's do split lines. And oops, let me escape this and actually zoom in so I'm not. All right, so I'm going to select the shape, select insert split line, and now I can go draw different split lines on here, and then let's change this entire thing to a satin, right? So I can come through here and keep on drawing, you know, whatever broccoli shapes I think are appropriate, which I don't like any of these at the moment, but if I turn on the picture, I could trace it, but I don't want to do that. Okay, so you can go through here and keep adding stitch directions along there. Not stitch directions, these split lines, to add that kind of different, you know, different look along there. Okay. All right. Then the same thing with this guy here. I can come along and again add my, not that guy, this guy. I can go, okay, same thing, add my split lines, and with the stitch direction being different, maybe I want a more jagged. All right, and again, let's change this entire shape from a fill to a satin. Okay, so you can keep doing that along here, and even this edge is kind of silly. So maybe I'd take the whole edge and say randomize just the end edge. Instead of both, I can say left, and maybe only make that 5, just so it's slightly random, you know, so I don't have such a hard overlap with my other things here, right? So you can keep playing with it, adding these different things to get different looks on it. Now, the other thing you have is these lines, they're a hard split. So every time the stitching hits that line, that split line, it's going to do a needle penetration. If you want that to be randomized, right, so not such a hard line, how do I fix that? I select the shape, click on that shape, the split line, go into properties, and that's the split. Now I can blur the outline, and notice that makes it a little softer on there, right? So it's basically staggering the stitches across there so that they're not all straight in line as one piece. So again, it's just a stylistic aspect of what do you think looks good for your broccoli that you're drawing, right? So I can select this, select that shape. Oops, come on. That one. And I can now go split those up a little bit to make them a little bit more jagged along there. And keep drawing my little split lines. Okay, so you get the idea. I don't know. I mean, literally whatever shape you want, you can draw. All right, and you notice when I go up and down the split line, is now non-effective. So it's better to keep your split lines running in, perpendicular, if you will, to the stitch directions in some manner. Okay, so there's a bunch of different ways we can do it, right? So I can go through and, keep playing with my little lines, my split lines, adding them on there. On the C1, I didn't show that one. I showed the stitch direction on the satin. Now I do the same thing. Go add my split lines along here to get, whatever shape you want your broccoli pieces to look like. Okay, so this section, that's essentially what you're doing there. The jaggedness there, like I said, you can do that with the blurred line. Okay, so it's stylistic, which is the right way, whatever looks good to you. These split lines, they're effective. I found it just as easy to draw this using single lines. The only thing you got to be careful of when doing this sort of with a whole bunch of elements is you got to be really careful not to overlap a ton of everything, otherwise it's going to be bulletproof. So you've got to pay attention to what you're drawing, just to avoid excessive needle penetrations in the same area, or thread upon thread upon thread. Now, there was also on that picture, just wanted to point this out, this stuff here, you see how the green's kind of bleeding into the white or cream, whatever color that is. When the stitch directions of satin stitches are the same next to each other, it's going to give that look, right? So here, if I have these satin stitches have similar stitch directions to this, it's going to kind of sink into that, all right? And I put this fill in the wrong spot, so it's messing it up. Let me move it. There we go. So this fill now and that one overlap, the stitch directions are same. So when it sews, as long as you keep the densities not super high, it's going to nest in together. Okay. So does that help any? This is another one where I just started drawing the different sections and I'd need to keep going through it. I added a blur line on there, which I wasn't really happy with. I like this one better. So it's just, you keep playing with it until you've got your section, until you have the look you personally like. Okay, does that help any? Hopefully it does. All right. I used a circle filled with color in my hat production frequently. I found the circle in shapes, but how do I quickly and easily fill the circle with colors? Okay, so let's do it. If I do new, so you went to shapes and you grabbed, there's circles in here? I don't see one. All right, I don't see a circle. It's probably there and I'm not looking at it. A lot of times when these come over, I'm assuming what you're getting is a vector or a outline, right? So if it comes over as a vector, there's no stitch directions on it, right? So if I do 3D, it still looks like this. There's no stitch directions. So the only thing you have to do with a vector to turn it into a fill is select the shape. Right here, you have insert stitch direction. If I click on that, left click and drag, it puts a stitch direction in and now it's filled in, okay? If instead you draw a complex fill and a circle, I can do click, click, hold the shift key down and drag my mouse. That's a perfect circle. Now from here, you've got vector. So you would have to then select that, click on this guy, do another circle, and again, click, click, hold the shift key and drag, and now you've got a border for your circle. You can then take those two things and center and align them, just in case you didn't pick perfect. So how did I do that? I selected both, centered it horizontally, center it vertically. So if I move it over, just so you can see it work in real time, horizontally, vertically. Now they're all lined up. And now I've got a fill with a satin stitch. If you've got professional, it gets a little bit easier. You can select the shape, hold your shift key down and click on that, and it will put it exactly on the border so you don't have to worry about it. So, in the same way, if I have a fill shape, a satin border, and I want to fill on there, If you have professional, I can just hold the shift key down and click on that, and it will fill it in. If I don't, how do I do it? Well, I click on the complex fill, circle, click, click, hold my shift key down and drag, and now I've got a fill. Then I just got to center them to make sure my eyeballing was actually correct. Okay? So there's that. So what was the question? Make sure I actually answered it. I use a circle filled with color. I found the circle. How do I fill it in? So that's how you'd fill it in. Okay? My lettering looks spotty in places. You were told you need more density. Density. So first you got to understand what's going on here. So density is one solution, but it may not actually solve the look, right? Because what's going on? I've got satin stitches along here, and in this area it looks weird, right? That's because it's going to a fill. And I'll go show you why that's happening when I open up DesignShop. Same with here, it's going to a fill. So let's go look at it, and we can talk about the properties and what density is. So fill properties. Okay, so I drew a bunch of G's. So what you've got is this. All right, so I've got a G, and we've got satin stitches. It's going to a fill, and then it's got satin stitches. And this is just a random fill. So first off, why is that happening? So if I measure across that stitch, you'll see it's about 90 points. And over here, we've got stitch lengths of 80 points. All right, so if I go into the properties, we go to top stitching. This property right here is what's governing when it switches from a satin stitch to a fill stitch. For use fill for stitch lines greater than 80 points. So when a stitch, the length of a stitch from one side to the other, when it gets bigger than whatever number's in here, so if the minute it goes to 81, it's going to stop doing satin stitches and it's going to start doing fill stitches, and it defaults to a random fill. Why is this, or why do we even want this? If I have a piece of thread on a garment, right, that's an inch long, and I put it in the laundry, so I literally have an inch piece of thread here doing a column of stitches, I can sew that. When I put it in the laundry, is it going to come out looking pretty like when I created it? No. Or when I grab a pin and put it in my pocket, it's going to be more prone to snagging, right? So the longer those stitches are, the more likely they are to be damaged, both in laundering and just handling, right? So if you're going to start increasing the satin stitch longer, then I would say between 60 and 80 points. Anything bigger than that, think carefully if you want to do that. If it's on a hat, those don't get the same amount of touch that garments do, right? Because it's just the brim of the hat. So particularly if it's puff, you can get away with that. Now, you can't really on a left chest logo, all right? So, but that's what's happening here. It's converting it to fill. So one solution, not that I recommend it, is I can make this bigger and it will get rid of those fill regions. Again, think carefully about that before you go there. What are some other ways we can do it? So I did a whole bunch of different ideas over here just to show you have options, right? So this one here, well, let's not start with that one. Let's start with this guy. So if I go into, I'll just recreate it. All right, so I've got my text here. If I go into the properties and go to top stitching, I can come down here and say common auto split. What that does is, remember on the broccoli I had that blur line? It's kind of doing that. It's blurring a line through here, which gives it kind of the look of two satin stitches without a hard line in the middle. I personally like this look a lot when doing this rather than a random fit. To me, it's more organized and it looks prettier. So you can do that. You can also change it to a regular auto split. That will do that along the entire letter. Again, depending on what you want to do, may or may not be the look you want. You can come in and let's say I left it on random. So if I leave it random, no. All right, so another option, I can take this and I can say operation convert to wireframe. Then I can come over here and that same split line, I can draw split lines through here, right? And if I want a hard line like that, that's, oops, escape. That's cool. I don't personally like hard lines, so then again, you can select that and blur the line. You can try this alternate one, which kind of gives it more of a pattern to look through there. In this column here, again, I can add another split line through here. And again, so these are all just different ways you can play with this. And again, what's right? What's right is whatever you like, right? So you can do things like that. So you have the auto split, the common auto split. This is changing the stitch length to there. Now, what your question you originally said is someone said you need more density. So what is density to begin with? So if I draw, I'm just going to draw a column stitch because it's easy. All right, to explain. So density. Oh, all right. Escape. Let's make this not auto so I can actually show it to you. There we go. All right. So the density of this thing is set to 4. That means from this stitch to this stitch, that distance between those rows, so it's going to go there, and now it's coming down to the next row there. The separation between there is this distance, 4 points. So if I measure from point to point there between my rows, it's 4 points. So if you want the stitches closer together to fill in more, I can come in here and reduce the density. I'm going to do it drastically just to show you. Don't go down to 2, but just to show you, it doubles the number of stitches. If on the other hand, they're too close together and you want a more sparse look, you want less stitches, you can increase it. And again, I just did drastic numbers to show you. That's changing that distance from one spot to another to 8 points, from one row to another, right? So if you leave this guy on, oh, I'm gonna delete that split line. Oops, undo. Properties, go back to random. Okay, so if I want to leave that look and I just want to change the density, I can decrease this and it's going to add more stitches through here. It's not going to change the fact that it's doing random stitches through here, but it's going to put the stitches closer together. Okay? Does that help? All right, hopefully it does. But those are kind of the different ways you can attack that. All right. Cool. That's what density is. The other thing you might want to look at is this is going on top of a fill, and I see it's kind of jumping the edge along here is because it's falling into that fill a little bit different. If you use an edge walk along there, it might clean a little bit of that up. So just for underlay wise, if you do an edge walk, that might be helpful. All right. I have a logo. It's a lot of work. I've got to create black outlines around all this, and it's a lot of small dimensions. How can I do this easier and faster? To be honest, there's no easy way to do these kind of designs other than working through them. I mean, on these shadings here, you can do like a satin stitch with a light satin that's kind of like a zigzag through there and kind of fake that in. Another idea you can do is rather than doing like the black outlines on these bricks, you can do satin stitches and rely on the different stitch directions and overlap to form that look. So to the eye, it looks like there's lines there, but they're not. But these sorts of tiny things, there's no real easy way to do it other than walking through it one at a time, right? So just plowing your way through the puzzle, doing the bean stitches, doing the little satins. This stuff down here is so small, there's no way I would outline any of that. I would just do satin stitches for all of that. So do a gray satin for the knife top and do a red column stitch for the knife bottom. This cross up here's, depending on how small, is going to be a pain. And again, there's no way effectively to outline all that. So I would just do that all in gold and without the black outlines on all of the stuff up here. But it's really just working through it. These sorts of things are complex. They take some time to work on, particularly depending on how small you need it. The details just take time to work through and know what, I mean, bottom line is I can't sew anything smaller than the needle, right? So, and a lot of the features are smaller than the needle. So when you're looking at that, it then becomes, how are you going to simplify it? How are you going to work through it to get a look without making it just a mess? So that really just takes practice, time to get through it. I wish there was an easy answer for that, but those sorts of things just take time. You got to work through it. I find them fun because it's like a puzzle. So how can, like all this black, how can I get around those stones and everything with the same number of stitches everywhere, but not having a bunch of trims. So to me, it's a fun puzzle. When I bring a vector into DesignShop, should you digitize with columns or fills? Or should you convert stitches? Is it just preference? It's just preference. A lot of it depends on the size of the element, right? So if I've got a design, this is not a good example of a design. All right, just trying to think where design is. Oh, I know, I'll go open this. I just want to have something to point at rather than me waving my hands in the air. When no one understands what I'm talking about. Let's see, let's open that one. Okay, so when I'm looking at this, depending on the size, let's make it smaller. I'm gonna make it like a 3-inch logo. All right, so when I'm trying to decide what type of element to make these, a lot of it's gonna depend on how big these elements are. So I can, first off, size the design to what you want. So I said this is 3, this is 45 points. So satin stitches are good, 60 points or less usually. So I'd probably do these tree trunks as satins. Just visually, all this black stuff is going to be smaller than that tree trunk, which was 45. So I can do all the black outlines as satin stitches. My sun or my tree, these are big. That's 152. So doing it as a satin is probably not a wise idea. So I do these areas as fills. But then my sun rays are 30 points. So I could do the sun rays individually as satin stitches and then the center as a fill. Or you could also just take this entire yellow and make it all fill. Again, what's correct? It's what looks good to you. I like the look of varying satin and fills in a project. It gives, the light's going to hit everything different and it looks more visually appealing than if everything is just flat. So I'm not a big fan of everything being flat. I tend to mix them and use as many satin stitches as possible and column stitches because I like that look, but that's a me thing. Some people love the flat look and that's cool. It's really what look do you want to go for? So your question was, should you convert stitches? You can. I like manually digitizing everything, but I mean, you can come in here and say, all right, let's convert that sun all as one. Well, that did it as this fill, and some of it's satin, some of it's not, based on the stitch direction. That's not my idea of a good time. So I personally would go delete that stitch direction. Come in here, if I didn't want to re-digitize it myself, I would go add these splice lines along here. This will I got to do them all, otherwise it doesn't work. And I'm doing it as straight lines rather than curves, but that's just because I want to go quick. All right, so then I can come over here and add stitch directions for all of these sections. And change it to satin. There we go. Oops, there we go. And I can do things like that. I can change this to be, I don't know, fill underlay, or move my starts and stops around to get rid of that mess there. There. Okay, so, and then I can play with my stitch direction since I did it a little rough. So I like that sort of thing better, but what's right or wrong? It's 100% up to you of what looks good to you. All right. I mean, you could even do each of these different, do a fill, and then put one of those effects where it kind of looks like it fills out. I'll just draw the circle just so you can see it. I'm not going to split everything and redo it. But if I do a fill, come into the properties, go into effects, do the distortion effect, radial out, I can make it look more circular. Okay, that's stylistic. Do I like that? Maybe, maybe not. Do I want it flat or do I want it more rounded? Okay, so varying the stitch directions, varying the type of elements, that's always going to bring more interest to what you're working on. So I like doing that personally because it just makes it look more complex, more fun, more interesting. Okay. Any more questions so far? Okay. What kind of file can you load in DesignShop? PDF, AI, ESP, EPS, I think, JPEG, and others. And convert to embroidery. Well, if you want to convert to embroidery, use a vector format, EPS or SVG. I think some AIs work depending on. I usually just open my vector in Illustrator. I use Illustrator, select it, copy it, open DesignShop and paste it. That's my highly preferred method for me. I just copy and paste it in and use that. JPEGs, you can bring JPEGs in. That's what this thing is right here. So this is, well, it's a bitmap, but same difference. So you can bring in pictures, PNGs, JPEGs, bitmaps, TIFF files, lots of medias, right? And from there, converting these is a little more interesting. It depends on how clean your art is, whether it's going to convert right. So you can use the stitch graphic, this guy right here, stitch graphic region, which, you know, it works quite well. And then I can modify it. You saw me do the sun already, where it selected it, and then I added some splice lines and changed the stitch direction. So you can go through and use this guy, or you can select the whole thing and go, I don't know, just convert it for me. So go into the graphic and say, all right, just auto convert and see what you get. Personally, this ain't how I would do it. So I would delete that right off the bat. The rest of this, I'd probably take a little bit of time and fix the waves, but I could use that. And then all this black stuff, I would go digitize it myself, right? And just kind of work through getting those borders in so that they're satin stitches. You know, so I would go through and do that myself. Okay. But yeah, in the sun, I like the satin rays and the filled in the middle, so I would either fix this or go do it myself. But yeah, you can convert it. Yeah. So vector files are going to be better than your JPEGs because the JPEGs are really going to depend on how clean your artwork is, whether it's going to convert well. Can you show how to change the settings into fills so when you don't have the seam divide? Okay, so when new file, draw a fill. Okay, so when I have, this is not the best way to show it, but I'm going to show it this way anyway. So if I have my start and stop in the middle, it is going, you see that seam right there? No, it's a little hard to see. Right there is a seam, okay? And that's because how it's going to sew is it sews, all right, let's fast forward this. Okay, all right, so it's going to sew down, but because I need it to stop in the middle, now it's going to sew back towards something, all right? With this much fill going backwards, I wouldn't suggest that. But what you'll end up with at times is a gap along there, or you'll have a really heavy seam that you can see. So how do you fix it so that it doesn't do that? Well, that's in the properties. You go into properties, go to advanced, and under advanced there is fill line overlap. How many lines of the fill do you want to overlap the prior section? So, you can make this whatever your preference is. So then when it gets to the part that's already sewn, it will go back over it for 5 rows, 1 row, 2 row, whatever you set it on. So that's under properties, advanced, fill line overlap right there. Okay. So that's where it is, and that's how you'll get an overlap of the 2 sections right there. Okay. I have a Melka Bravo X. Can it accommodate this fast frames? What's the largest sewing field with the bigger hoop, or should I just have gone with 15? Okay. So all of this if you go into Design OS, it's not in DesignShop, and so you can go to where your hoop setup is, and any of the available hoops will be that you can turn on will have checkboxes next to it when you go to turn on your hoops. So you'll be able to see what's available for your machine there within the OS. Now, your machine only has a sew field of, because you have a Bravo X, so this is your sew field. So getting an 18-inch frame isn't going to help you because this is the largest design you can sew on that machine. So it's, I mean, while you might be able to put a bigger hoop on there, it's not going to be useful, and you're not going to be able to select it to let the machine know that's what you have in there, because it's not set up for it. You know, your machine can't sew that large anyway, because that is your sew field. So yeah, the 18.5-inch you're not going to be able to use anyway, or be able to set up within Bravo X OS, the BOS. So I wouldn't get that one. Yeah. So what other questions? Let's see. I'm working on a 6-panel hat. The client wants it on this side. How do I make sure it's centered? Okay. So how I do that is, you've got a seam down the middle here. I would do it this way. So if I turn on the hoops, go select my WACF, apply, okay. All right. I would do some math, right? So whatever your design is, so I'm going to draw a escape. Let's say your design is 3.5 inches, right? And if I grab me a soft tape measure across there, and let's say that panel of the hat is this big, whatever that is. I'm going to make that a vector real quick. Operations, convert to vector. All right, so that's 4.7, let's say it's 4.75. I don't know, whatever it is. So let's say that is the size this way, you know, from the seam over to the next seam. I would measure that. All right, so there's the size of the panel. This is my design. I would select these two items and center them. Okay, and that's where I place my design. When I go to load this, I would load it up into the machine. I would drop the needle right on the center seam, and then do a trace, make sure up and down on your hat it's where you want it to be, and then I would sew it. And because we measured everything and centered the actual design on the actual size of that panel, now it's centered. And as long as you're dropping the needle on the center of the hat, so that center seam, it's going to position this that far over and center it. So as long as you measure everything right and create this box right, so let's say that really was 4 inches. Okay, so again, I would move that right here. Take this guy, take that and this, select both of them, and I would center it. There you go. And now it will be centered on a 4-inch wide panel, right? So I drop the needle, I would go sew my design over here, and poof, all done. So that's how I do that one. I'm considering upgrading my computer, but worry about issues, compatibility issues. I have an XTS and OS 10, V9 Plus. I'm running Windows 10. Well, I have compatibility issues. I'm running the latest Windows on everything, and I've got AOS out there, an old version, not even the current version, and it runs my really old Big Red and XTS that I have, and it runs just fine. So there is a document out there in the oh goodness, what is that thing called? My mouth is this right here in the FAQ. So if you search compatibility, which I think I should be able to, come on, search changing Windows compatibility. Nope, that's not it. Minimum computer requirements. Is that it? No, that's not it either. The compatibility, software compatibility is what I was looking for. Yeah. Nope, not that one either. I know it's out here. All right, so you've got different ones out here. Depending on what version of Windows, there's version compatibilities out here on this. So anyhow, I don't, Windows 11, there it is. It's the first one. So it'll show you what's compatible with what in here. So like I said, I don't have any issues. And I run an old AOS on the latest Windows, as well as the latest OS for my X machines. So it's all good. All right. Any other questions before we pop offline? We did get some comments out there in the chat for you on the computer requirements. Yeah, and the graphic file types that can open in DesignShop, those sorts of things, as well as the compatibility link that I was looking for. It's out there for you as well. So I think that's all the questions I had sent in ahead of time. If you have questions during the week, you can always, rather than trying to remember them until the next time I ask, hey, do you have any questions? You can go to the forum that we've got. You can get to it on Milco-Service, FAQ, DesignShop, and then on the DesignShop talk. Right here will take you to the forum where, anytime you've got questions, you can type them in, submit it any time of the day, whatever you want, whether we've asked for questions or not. And when I go for the next DesignShop talk, I go pull them all. And that's where the broccoli question and some of those others came from. Okay, so you can type in any questions, but I'll run my mouth for a little bit longer in case anyone else has questions. But short of that, we will be back next week on Thursday to see what other questions you have. Yeah. This week I get to go to Sarasota to watch my youth crew row. We've got a bunch of young ones going this time. Their first time doing a big regatta out of the area, so that'll be fun for them. So, yeah. All right, y'all. Have a fantastic weekend. The holiday season's always exciting, so hope you guys are running fast and furious on all your equipment. Have a great weekend. I'll be back next Thursday. All right, bye everyone.